Just tuning in, we're about to go live with another broadcast of the Never Again live show from Israel-Now.ca with Mayor Weinstein, and guests will announce a little bit later. I'm going to wait for a few more people to click on, but we'll be starting momentarily. If anybody is on, I see there are a couple of people on, please start sharing this on your Facebook page, on our Facebook page, or on our YouTube page, or you can go to our website at Israel-Now.ca, where it'll be playing live there as well. It's an exciting episode for several reasons. We'd like to, first of all, remember welcoming in the new government of Israel and the ascent onto the Temple Mount of Itamar Ben G'vir, despite threats from Hamas and other terrorist organizations. And without any further ado, now that we got almost a quorum, we're going to get started. Always with Mayor Weinstein as our host. Dr. B in the corner, that's me, by the way. Again, you can find us live at Israel-Now.ca as well as on YouTube and on Facebook. Please do like us, share us, join us in the conversation. Tonight's episode is going to emphasize Itamar Ben G'vir's ascent to the Temple Mount. And we'll have a conversation about that. And please do get on our chat on YouTube and join us. Give us your comments. We do have a guest with us today who's been with us many times. And that's our special guest, Mayor Jalowitz. And with a reputable past, and we don't have time to go over all of his accomplishments, but he was the National Executive Director of the Zionist Organization of America, as well as the National Chairman of the Jewish Defense League. We'd like to wish a mazel tov to the new government of Israel and all of the ministers appointed by the new government. We'd like to thank them all and wish them all a great time and an effective ruling over our homeland. Just a sidelight, as we end 2022 and start 2023, anti-Semitic hate crimes in USA have skyrocketed every year. If we compare this 2022 to 2021, no surprise to us, although it seems to be denied by many who are opposed to us, that in New York City, there were 260 anti-Semitic hate crimes reported, as opposed to 170 in 2021. Los Angeles, 80 reported, as opposed to 71 in 2021. In Chicago, 30, as opposed to 8 the previous year. And Wisconsin, of all places, the home of cheese. Why in Wisconsin has there been a 500% increase in anti-Semitic hate crimes between 2015 and 2021? I can't explain that. They don't have any Jews there. How can they be anti-Semitic? The incident of anti-Semitic hate crimes in 2022 was 3 times that of anti-Islamic hate crimes. So don't believe the propaganda that we read in the papers and see on television. The world is a dangerous place. We know that. But it's not because of those who do evil. It's because of those who look on and do nothing. Here at Israel-Now.ca, please support us. We can't do our work without some financial support. And as importantly, join us, share us, share. Together, can we fight anti-Semitism? So join us at Israel-Now.ca. Mayor?
Good to be with you. Thank you, Gary, for that intro. Let me emphasize again tonight, whoever is watching or whoever is going to watch after the show is recorded on our YouTube channel, please share this on your various social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We'd appreciate it on your email list as well. This is extremely important, what we're getting across tonight. We're going to be talking primarily about Har Bayit, the Temple Mount, what it means to the Jewish people. Member of Knesset, Itamar Ben G'vir, going up to the Temple Mount about 24 hours ago. And the world is going crazy. And we're seeing so many anti-Semitic statements coming out from every direction right now. In fact, in the Jordanian parliament today, a member of the parliament in the Jordanian legislature referred to Jews as apes and pigs and said that everyone should become a suicide bomber and kill Jews. This is what's going on. Jordan, their peace partner with Israel. Welcome to the reality of the Middle East. We just finished a couple of weeks ago, if that, celebrating Hanukkah. Hanukkah, we talk about the rededication of the Beis HaMikdash. We cleaned it up after it was desecrated. The Maccabees cleaned it up and lit the menorah. How special it would be if the president of the state of Israel would light the menorah on Har Bayit. Incredible. But there's the status quo, the so-called status quo, and Jews are supposed to be allowed to visit the Temple Mount, and now the BDS crowd / radical Islam / many Islamic countries or Arab countries don't want Jews setting foot on the Temple Mount. Who owns it? 1967, Israel won the war. Israel asked Jordan, don't enter the war. Jordan entered the war. What did they want? They wanted to drive the Jews into the sea. Israel won. And Israel returned to all kinds of areas, including the Temple Mount, and saw anything holy to the Jewish people desecrated. The Kotel was made into a garbage dump. Can you believe it? Jewish gravestones were made into walkways to latrines. It was horrible. That's what we saw. And our hand was outstretched. The Jewish hand was outstretched for peace. And they got the opposite. They got the opposite. On the Temple Mount, I saw this during Ramadan, during the last Ramadan, when I was in Israel then. And there were Hamas rallies on the Temple Mount. Hamas is recognized by all Western countries and some Arab countries as well as a terrorist organization. They're holding rallies on the Temple Mount, waving Hamas flags, talking about and chanting to kill Jews as they chant, Khaybar, Khaybar, the armies of Muhammad are coming for you. This is what's going on, and the world is silent when that goes on. As far as the status quo, how does Israel even allow Hamas flags to be flown on Har Bayit? The status quo? Anyways, I have with me, and I've had him many times on the show, Mayor Jolowitz. and we know each other for many, many years, and our roots are with the Jewish Defense League. And we're going to get into quite the discussion tonight about the Temple Mount. And I want to bring Mayor on right now. Mayor, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
Good to be with you. Mayor, I mean, it's beyond outrageous what's going on right now. How do you see it, what's going on?
Okay, it's our fault. I've said that before. I know it upsets people. And I think there was something else which I had mentioned in the previous broadcast also, and I think it's fitting that I start also. I think it was in a previous broadcast with your podcast, I said that I feel like a mosquito in a nudist colony. You just don't know where to begin. I do want to get to the point of the status quo, which is important. But as a theme which underscores what we're going to be talking about today, Gary, when he did his introduction, talked about the fact that the anti-Semitism in Wisconsin had grown so tremendously, and he sort of said, I think somewhat tongue-in-cheek, how can it be there aren't really Jews in Wisconsin? And as a backdrop, I want to throw this in. In 2018, the Anti-Defamation League did what might have been its most comprehensive study of all times. They called it the Global Index 100. The Global Index 100 measured the anti-Semitism in 100 nations around the world, and even though they had a list of 101, and the reason they had a list of 101, because leading that list of the most anti-Semitic nations was a non-nation, a non-state. It was an entity. It was what they called the West Bank and Gaza, the most anti-Semitic. And what they did is they assigned a percentage of how anti-Semitic the people in those respective countries were. When you looked at the top 20, 19 of the top 20 countries on the level of anti-Semitism were Islamic states, Muslim states. An obvious common denominator. What was interesting, to come back to the point that Gary had made, was that I think it was number 22 or 23 was Indonesia. Now, Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world by population. Indonesia's population is 257 million people, of which 227 million people are Muslims. And yet, according to the Global 100 Index, as they called it, the Anti-Defamation League, Indonesia, its citizens, they said 48% of the population of Indonesia was anti-Semitic. And to come back to what Gary said, well, there are no Jews in Indonesia. Well, actually, there are Jews. There are 190 Jews who live in Indonesia. There are 227 million Muslims who live in Indonesia, but 48% of them anti-Semitic. So either the 227 million people had occasion to bump into the 190 Jews and didn't like them, therefore were anti-Semitic or became anti-Semitic, or more realistically, we as logical people come to the conclusion, what is the common denominator? What does Indonesia have in common with the West Bank, Judea and Samaria? And the answer, of course, is Islam. It's Islam. And unless we recognize that that is where the problem is, this is a can that we're going to keep kicking down the road. I do want to talk about the status quo, but the thing that troubles me the most, something we've discussed also on this podcast, is the fact that our side makes a terrible mistake. We did it again this week. In fact, even the right-wing element in Israel did it this week. And what we said was that we want the Jews to have the same rights to pray in the Temple Mount as other religions do, as the Christian religion and the Muslim religion. That's wrong. I don't want the same rights. The Temple Mount is ours. Har HaBayit is ours. This is not equal rights. We're not looking for some kind of parity. The Temple Mount is ours. They are the ones who should be quarreling that they aren't getting the opportunity to pray. And it's our fault for having done that. And forgive me if I can, I just want to give as a backdrop, 2 or 3 minutes before we went on the air, I quickly looked up a speech. In 2018, in May 2018, the United States officially moved its embassy. The American embassy was moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And speeches were given, this wonderful thing, Jerusalem, which for 3,000 years had actually been the Jewish capital. Wasn't Donald Trump that recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. It was King David who did that 3,030 years before. But nonetheless, there was a terrible mistake that was made by not only those people who are the friends of Israel, but the so-called friends of Israel. And I'll tell you why I refer to them as so-called Israel. There was a particular, speeches were given at the time by Donald Trump via video, this enormous screen. Jared Kushner gave a speech. David Friedman, the American ambassador to Israel, gave a speech. Mike Pence had given a speech before. And later on, Mike Pompeo, all friends of Israel, gave the speech. But there was a particular sentence which appeared word for word, verbatim, in every single one of those speeches. And I just quickly grabbed a transcript of the speech as it was given by Jared Kushner, talking about the wonder of America moving its embassy to Jerusalem. And permit me, because I think it's the backdrop for what we're going to be talking about today. This is what Jared Kushner said, and then I'm going to read you the line, which was the ubiquitous line, which was the line parroted by all the so-called friends of Israel. Kushner said, and I'm reading, "Jerusalem is a city unique in the history of civilizations. No other place on earth can claim significance to 3 major religions." Big mistake. And I mean, I don't want to stop here and talk about Mecca and Medina, and for the Catholics, it's the Vatican, but nonetheless, no other place on earth can claim significance to 3 major religions. Each day, Jews pray at the Western Wall, Muslims bow in prayer at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and Christians worship at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And here's the sentence that followed, which was, as I said, in every single speech given by Trump, by Kushner, by Friedman, by Pompeo, and Mike Pence. They all had this sentence. That is why President Trump has called on many times, including right now, and he was referring to the big screen where Trump had just spoken, on all parties to maintain the status quo at Jerusalem's holy sites, including the Temple Mount, also known as Haram el-Sharif.
Mayor, let me ask you a question about that quote that you gave. So that quote that they were emphasizing, did they get that from Yehuda HaMaccabee?
They got it from the State Department, actually. The State Department. It's true. Yeah, well done. But it's remarkable. There are 3 pieces that are of trouble here, and we have ignored it. The first one is that we're the ones who say Jerusalem, home to 3 great religions. Jerusalem, and there are posters put out by Israel's Ministry of Tourism, which actually says home to 3 great religions. It is not home to 3 great religions. Let's put that note. We're the ones, language means everything. And we're using language to bastardize the truth and to subvert our very claim and our rights to Jerusalem and to the Temple Mount as its holiest place. The second part was, and we'll talk about this, is to maintain the status quo. Why would we want to maintain a status quo when the status quo says the Jews can only pray at the Temple Mount? If they don't bring a siddur, they can't pray publicly. They can't drink from the water, from the drinking fountain that others can drink from. That if they are seen, if their lips are moving and it appears that they're praying, they will be ushered off, and that they are given selective hours by which they can actually climb and walk the periphery of the Temple Mount. That's the status quo. And even
and you have to stand, and you have to stand in line for about an hour and a half to 2 hours to get on.
That's exactly right. That's exactly. And this week, right-wing elements, colleagues, friends, associates that we consider to be comrades in arms have basically said, no. Itamar Ben G'vir is ascending the Temple Mount hasn't changed the status quo in order not to upset the UN or Blinken.
Yeah.
Well, no, our point should be we have a new government, and the first thing we're going to announce is that we are destroying the status quo. The status quo doesn't work for us. But the third point is that in every one of those speeches that I mentioned, they said the Temple Mount, also known as Haram el-Sharif. Language matters. And by using the wrong language, Haram el-Sharif, in essence, it's no different than we complain about the fact that we should be speaking about Judea and Samaria. That the moment that you say West Bank, you are in essence surrendering the narrative and the debate to the other side. Well, here it is. Our best friends refer to the Temple Mount as Haram el-Sharif. We lose this war because we are the idiots who don't know how to prosecute this war. Anyhow, I have lots of,
and it seems that Jews it seems that Jews are ashamed to define what is a Jewish state.
yes.
That's at the heart of this. That's really at the heart of this whole discussion. Is it a Jewish state? Do you want a Jewish state? What is a Jewish state? And there's even the definition in Israel. Hopefully they'll change that. They have a debate about that right now. What's going on in the grandfather clause? It's like ridiculous. How do you define what is a Jew? Is according to Jewish law. And if so, who's born from a Jewish mother or a convert who converts according to Jewish law. It can't be defined by Hitler, who said, well, if you got a trace of Jewish blood in you. No, that's not what it means to be a Jew. Just like I said, you have a Jewish mother or you converted according to Jewish law. And that's it.
Well, Israel is not a well nation. We can go back an entire generation and remember that in the Knesset, there were debates, what is a Jew? There was a debate, what is the Jew? They were trying to define what a Jew is. And it's remarkable that it was being debated in the Knesset, not only by those people who have a sense of Jewish tradition and religion and everything else, but also those Jews who were Marxists, who had no affiliate, Jewish people, Jewish Knesset members, who had no affiliation to Jewish tradition, whatnot, and yet they were allowed to. And here's the ironic thing: the Arabs sitting in the Knesset got to vote on the issue of Miu Yehudi, who's a Jew. The Arabs got to vote on who is a Jew, and you wonder.
Make some sense out of that.
Are we a normal people? The answer, of course, is no. We're not a normal people. We're not a normal people. It's amazing. You know, can you imagine a debate in democratic Saudi Arabia? Yeah, right. in their parliament, and they debate who is a Muslim, and the Jewish parliamentarians are barking out what they think a Muslim is. Seriously, it's a mockery. It is a mockery.
You know, there's an Arab, Mayor. There's an Arab in Israel. He was in the IDF and Golani Brigade. He advocates for Israel. Yosef Haddad, very active on social media, posts a lot of great things, a lot of real good things. And so I think it was earlier today he posted that an Arab Muslim woman who's a member of the Knesset was warning about Ben G'vir's visit to the Temple Mount, that she's justifying Hamas and everything. And he says his caption is something like, why are you bothered by what Hamas says? You already have people advocating for Hamas in the Knesset.
That's exactly right.
And he says it, he's an Arab. Where are our people to say reality instead of apologizing?
Yeah, it's our fault. What we try to do is we try to push whatever buttons we need to push in order to get the world to like us.
Yeah.
It's Rabbi Kahana spoke about it. Mayim Ruah Goyim. What will the Gentiles say? This was the thing. What will the Gentiles say? And we seem to fashion our political discourse based on what it takes. There was a vote at the United Nations. It was taken a few days ago. We all saw the vote. It was 86 to 27 with 53 abstentions against Israel. What was the vote? The vote was a vote that was put up. In fact, I've got the vote here. The vote was put up in order to have the United Nations recommended that the International Court of Justice decide whether or not Israel is a belligerent occupier of Palestinian lands, which is interesting. And the way that the resolution was worded was viciously anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, and everything else. But there was a vote. Israel actually proclaimed that they were happy with the results, mind you, 87 in favor, 26 against, 53. Israel said that they were thrilled that more people abstained in the vote against Israel than had previously abstained. We considered that to be a victory. Now, it's interesting because if you look at the countries, well, here, let me begin with this, and we spoke about this before. Everyone, these people, today I was listening to Benjamin Netanyahu speaking, and he was talking about the prospects of this government and on, and we're going to further and add to the peace treaties that we have that were done under his, under his sponsorship and everything else. Israel doesn't have peace treaties with United Arab Emirates, with Kuwait. It has normal agreements of normalizations. And these people are either dumb or they're playing us for being dumb. And I believe it's the latter. And when they talk about, we're now looking for a peace treaty with Sudan, we're looking for a peace treaty with Saudi Arabia. And I can speak about the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002, which was Saudi Arabia, which is basically Israel's suicide. But nonetheless, the point that I'm trying to make is Israel's pleased that more people abstained. And when you look at the nations that voted against Israel, in that 87 that voted against Israel, and it's a great number because usually 113 or 120 in that range vote against Israel, every single one of the countries that Israel considers itself to be at peace with, I'm talking about the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, every one of them, Egypt, Jordan, they all voted against Israel. Okay? So it'd be foolish for me to mention all the countries, but this is funny because if you look at the nations that voted with Israel, and actually Israel was pleased that some of them had abstained in the past. Those nations voting against the resolution, and once again, this is whether or not Jews have title or right to be in Jerusalem, because they're talking about the occupation. For the rest of the world, the reason that there's no peace in the Middle East is because of this thing called occupation. Now, you had mentioned something before, Jordan not being at peace. Between 1948 and 1967, 19 years that the West Bank, to use their term, the Judea and Samaria, the Jerusalem, Eastern Jerusalem, was in Arab hands. It was in Jordanian hands. It was illegally occupied by Jordan. And the question that I've asked before, and I ask rhetorically, and people will know where I'm going with this, how many Arab leaders from what Arab state visited Jerusalem in those 19 years? What Arab leader from any of the Arab nations in the world visited Haram al-Sharif during those 19 years? And the answer is not one. On January 1st, 1950, there was a photograph that was taken of King Hussein in a small plane as he flew close to it was over the Jordanian desert, over the Temple Mount. And there's a photograph of, you can see the side of his face, and looking down, you can see the Dome of the Rock. That is as close as any Arab leader came to what they now consider their holy of holies. And who played into this thing? Who voted against this resolution? Allow me, it'll only take 10 seconds. Australia, Austria, Canada, Czechoslovakia, Estonia, Germany, Guatemala, Hungary, Israel, Italy, Liberia. Here's the good part. Marshall Islands, Micronesia,
Great.
Nauru, which is a small island in the Pacific, Paulu, which is a small island in the Pacific, and the United States of America. And yet, Israel basically says that we aren't going to pay attention because this is a non-binding resolution. Well,
Right.
binding or not, it does lead to one thing. Israel needs to come to the realization that the world, 75 years later, still doesn't recognize Israel's right to exist. Period.
Yep.
It doesn't recognize Israel's right to exist. And those nations which have treaties with Israel, which are agreements, simply recognize that Israel exists de facto, the fact that Israel exists. And it's our fault because Jared Kushner and all the others who are such good friends of Israel talk about the Temple Mount, okay, talk about Jerusalem as home to three religions, talk about the status quo. The status quo is a disaster. And they talk about Haram el-Sharif. We have surrendered. And I do want to tell you that even though we're thrilled that we now have a new coalition government, certainly after the last, we can't pretend that everything is going to be good because there are two types of enemies that we confront today, that Israel confronts. One is the enemy within, and actually two elements within, the Israeli Arab, but we're talking about the Israeli leftists. These are people, the Temple Mount means nothing to them. They think that Israel should give it up. You're talking about liberal Jews in America and in Canada. They are the partners to the real enemies of Israel, and those are the nations that will try to truncate Israel in size in order to one day defeat Israel. So enemies are inside and out. And this government should be unapologetic about the fact that it will be, as you said in the beginning, hopefully, a government that goes after Jewish tradition, that we basically need to tell the world, as Jabotinsky wrote in a piece in 1934 about excessive apology, we need to tell the world, and I'm going to quote him, to go to hell.
Right.
Yeah.
After Auschwitz, we still haven't learned.
Can I throw something else in? I don't want to dominate.
No.
Okay. I mentioned Jabotinsky. Jabotinsky is certainly a hero to me. My oldest son, that's his middle name. I pulled something out. I pulled 3 or 4 different things out, but I found this to be relevant for 2 reasons. The point that I'm about to make, but also the fact that it was written 100 years ago. This is the anniversary, the 100th anniversary of an essay that he wrote, Zev Jabotinsky, perhaps the greatest of all Zionists. It's an essay titled The Iron Wall. And I just want to read you 2 very, very, very short paragraphs. This is what he said then in 1923. And he was talking about the fact at the time, the British, only a few years before, had come into possession of what the Ottoman Empire had held for 400 years. And it was about whether or not it was viable to establish a Jewish homeland, or perhaps even a Jewish state, as Zev Jabotinsky wanted, in the area of mandated Palestine. And Jabotinsky, who had the foresight that the others, the labor Zionists, didn't, wrote this. And it's important that we hear this because it's ever so relevant today, 100 years later. Here's what he wrote. I can now get to the point that the Arabs of the land of Israel should willingly come to an agreement with us is beyond all hopes and dreams at present and in the foreseeable future. This inner conviction of mine I express so categorically, not because of any wish to dismay the moderate faction of the Zionist camp, but on the contrary, because I wish to save them from such dismay. And the last sentence, apart from those who have been virtually blind since childhood, all the other moderate Zionists have long since understood that there's not even the slightest hope of ever obtaining the agreement of the Arabs in the land of Israel to a Palestine becoming a country with a Jewish majority. That was written 100 years, there, beautiful, 100 years ago.
Right.
And the Jews, the smartest people in the world, seem not to have learned the lesson. It's interesting because for those out there in the audience, the Yiddish expression, my parents would say it often. People would think someone would say something smart, and the Jew would point to and say, a Yiddish cup, a Yiddish cup. Like, yeah, this Jews are smart, a Yiddish cup. Well, the only ones with a Yiddish cup today, and for generations now, are the Arabs. The Arabs have the Yiddish cup.
You know, on that point of what Jabotinsky was saying, yesterday there was BDS groups. They're writing today too. The Israeli army murdered a 15-year-old Arab innocent child. They shot him. So listen, there's the information is out there as well on social media who this kid was. 15-year-old. He's already writing that his dream, his goal always is to kill Jews. Kill, kill, kill. That's what we have the screenshot too. We have the video, and there's a video. His last act, throwing Molotov cocktails at Israeli soldiers. This is the mentality. This is the mentality that's going on there.
Here's a note that was found, his suicide note in his pocket, which said on it, "Kill them wherever you may find them." Okay, this is the full text, and the Resistance News Network is calling him a martyr and shows a picture of him with another martyr, a teenager who decided to die. And of course, who's like him is Al Nabulsi, another psycho terrorist. So interesting. If we could then go, let's see, move along a little further, we could see that this is how he's being promoted in the Arab media. On the third day of 2023, the 15-year-old was murdered by Zionist forces while defending a camp. Well, he wasn't defending a camp. I'll show you in a minute the video that was taken right before, but I think that's important. I'll let you guys chat for a minute. I'll pause.
By the way, yeah, that quote, "Kill them wherever you find them," is a direct quote, of course, taken from the Quran.
Right.
Taken from the Quran. It's remarkable when you talk about people who are principled. It seems that our enemies are much more principled in their desire and determination to kill us than we are in falling back on Zionism as the right to defend our land. It's truly remarkable. We do. We live in an Orwellian world. We live in an Orwellian world.
Thank God that God watches over the Jewish people in Israel, and Israel's here. Because if there wasn't a God, it wouldn't last. The state, the way that we have leaders that they don't want a Jewish state, they work against it. But this is where we are right now. Thank God there's over 7 million Jews living in Israel. A lot of potential there, and hopefully that some people in this new coalition government could turn things around for the right, even in a small way, step by step going forward, could have a huge impact. That's what we hope for. But so far the reaction about, as you correctly point out, Har-Bayit is Christians, Muslims, Jews. This is our holiest site. This is where the temple stood. This is what we should always want, the temple.
So on his Facebook page, he posted, "Either we are grapes above the earth, or we are bones in its belly. When the bullets run out, martyrdom is closer to the wounded homeland. Glory, all glory." So this is a 15-year-old kid. This is what they're aspiring to be when they grow up as terrorists.
Yep.
Do you mind if I take us slightly in a different direction and just
go right ahead?
Okay.
Absolutely.
The other side of the coin. It's remarkable what Gary just showed us. The Arab Knesset members refer to these terrorists as fallen heroes, as they did just this past week, and as martyrs. Yet they sit in good standing in the Knesset. The person who is vilified in the Knesset by both Israel's enemies and many of its so-called friends. You've got to remember, 330 rabbis in America wrote, signed a letter which basically said that Itamar Ben G'vir and Bezalel Smotrich shouldn't be invited to speak to Jewish organizations because they represent the Jewish right wing, the fascists and everything else.
Right.
Why? Because they're religious. Now, here's the interesting thing. This is what I wanted to pull out. In the Knesset, we have Israeli Arabs who don't recognize Israel's, and this is the key word, right to exist. And they preach as much, and they've become ever so bold in doing it, much more than it was a decade ago.
Yep.
In Israel, we just had elections. In Israel, there are rules which govern elections and which party by virtue of its ideological position becomes disqualified from holding office. And it's in law. The parties that are disqualified in Israel, it's based on 4 specific things. And I just want to tell you what they are. The first is negating the state of Israel as a state of the Jewish people. Now, I'm going to read you 4 things, and each or all it takes is one, and if a party falls under that category, they're technically disqualified from running for the Knesset. The first, negating the state of Israel as a state of the Jewish people. 2, negating the democratic nature of the state of Israel. 3, incitement to racism. And 4, support for the armed struggle against the state of Israel. On every one of those counts, in the last 10 days, in the week prior to the establishment of the coalition, and in the 2 days since the establishment of the coalition, the Arab parties, the Arab Knesset members sitting in the Knesset have violated not 1, not 2, all 4 of those precepts, and yet no one says anything. Itamar Ben G'vir, religious Zionist, as the party is, decides that he's going to go to the Temple Mount, and not for the first, not for the second, and not for the third time. But all of a sudden, the Arabs realize that by threatening violence, that our side, that Israel, is going to somehow capitulate. And what happened? You had a mass call out on the part of the Israeli population telling Itamar Ben G'vir not to go to the Temple Mount, not to upset the Arabs. And the Arabs pay attention, and the Arabs realize that they're winning this war. I've used this phrase before, and I use it often. There is a war going on, and it's not the one with the Molotov cocktails and the bullets that are now being shot at Jewish and Israeli highways. It is a war of ideas. And we, dear friends, we are losing the war of ideas, and we're losing it badly.
Let me just make a quick comment since I have it here. But what's interesting is not the video I'm about to show, which is about 10 seconds long. It's that they knew that this 14-year-old boy was going to throw Molotov cocktails and get shot dead. That's what they wanted. They sacrificed him because it wasn't a coincidence that they had a camera facing where he was throwing Molotov cocktails. So when you look at the video, you think, oh, the kids throw Molotov cocktails. But think of what went into it, planning it so they could videotape it, so they could show us. So again, it's just a couple minutes long, so it's worth experiencing.
Okay.
So that's the cute little boy. This someone's videotaping him. That's him putting them all in cocktail, and then that's it. Well, what would any country do if someone throw bombs at their capital? I mean, it makes no sense that the world is blind to this.
Well, they don't care. They don't care, and the ones who are filming it, they love it. And the kid loves it also. That's what he wrote about. That's his dream.
There's an Instagram. I don't do social media. I do Instagram, though. Right. I do Instagram. If anyone wants to see some of my very iconoclastic posts, political, it's AKA Samson's Gym, one word, AKA Samson's Gym on Instagram. I think you'll get a kick out of it. I'm shadow banned. I have a small, I mean, I have a lot of people. You don't have to follow. You don't have to be a follower to see it. You can just Google AKA Samson's Gym and you can see it. And I'm shadow banned. I'm shadow banned. We've tested it. We've asked about 70 or 80 people after I post something, how many of you actually get access to seeing it? And 2 out of 70 get access. But nonetheless, I follow everything. I follow every Israeli politician whose name we know. Every single day, right wing, left wing, centrist, whatever. And I follow some of the Arab sites. And what's really remarkable is if you look at one of them, it's called Eye on Palestine.
Right.
Eye on Palestine. And every time that Israel defends itself, whatever, and an Arab terrorist is shot, neutralized, this is not a joke, if the Arab terrorist is under the age of 35 or 40, then the caption is Israel kills another Palestinian child.
Yeah.
So when a 37-year-old terrorist does something and Israel neutralizes them, they will have a picture, and quite often they find a picture of the kid in middle school. No, but even when they don't, they'll say Israel kills another Palestinian child. That's their favorite expression, a Palestinian child. It's really remarkable.
It's like nonstop. It's nonstop. And then you got Secretary of State Blinken, who's intermarried, married in a church. He's going to lecture Israel.
He did, and he did lecture Israel. 4 days ago, he made a phone call to Eli Cohen, Israel's new Minister of Defense, and and what did he say? He said, "I want you to know," he said, "I cordially congratulate you, but I want you to know that all our efforts, all the efforts of the Biden administration are going to be directed at one thing and one thing alone, the two-state solution." And in a future broadcast, I would love to, because that's my special, I'd love to do nothing more than a detailed analysis of the two-state solution, or as I call it, the two-state illusion, or better yet, the two-state delusion. But nonetheless, the two-state delusion is nothing more than an attempt to placate the enemy by telling them, if you stop murdering our children, we'll give you a state. Or we'll give you a state with the hope that you might stop killing our children. This is terrorism has been rewarded. And the Arabs are not stupid. They understand exactly what happens. They know exactly what happens. And Israel, and they also understand that these 87 countries that voted against Israel in the United Nations, they voted against Israel. Just a quick anecdote, whatever. They were talking about the Temple Mount, Haram al-Sharif, and they talk about the Arab claim to it. And it's truly remarkable if one knows anything about history. Obviously, we know when the first temple was built. First temple was built 957 BCE. Okay, it was destroyed. The next one was built 519 BCE, and then destroyed in 70. And it was only later, when Islam came to be in the 7th century, that they built the dome. That they built the Dome of the Rock in Al-Aqsa. Okay, and yet you have Jews, you have rabbis in America who know nothing of Jewish history. These are rabbis, Reform rabbis, who don't speak Hebrew, who can't read Hebrew, but nonetheless they believe that the Temple Mount is the Arabs. It belongs to the Arabs. A number of years ago, I asked him, 5 years ago, I asked my grandson, who loves to play Lego. He was 8 years old at the time. And I asked him, I was talking about the Temple Mount, the Bet HaMikdash, and I said, you know, that the world claims that the Arabs, this is the Arabs, look, there's a temple, there's a Dome of the Rock and everything else. Now, this is an 8-year-old mind, a smart one, who loves Lego, and he said, how can they make that mistake? And he said to me, anyone who plays with Lego understands that the one that was built on top of the other, that the one that was built below obviously came first. That, I mean, the simple rules of construction. So an 8-year-old child understands that, but Anthony Blinken doesn't.
Right.
This is the world that we have.
Right. And then you have Yair Lapid having convulsions.
We have Yair Lapid leading the cheerleading for the other side by saying, if in fact if we go to the Temple Mount, if Itamar Ben G'vir goes to the Temple Mount, if he climbs, that there will be many deaths which will be on us. We will have caused. The Arabs relish in this insanity. They relish in it.
They sit back and lap it up.
Yeah, we are not a well people. It was Rabbi Kahana who said many years ago, several decades ago, he was talking about the Jewish condition. He's talking about the pathological psychosis that guides the Jews. And he said, he was talking about the fact, he was asked a question. And his answer, which I've heard him give before, he said, well, the answer isn't logical. The answer is psychological. And then he went on to say that there isn't a national couch large enough to hold all the people in Israel.
Exactly.
The psychiatrist needs to try and understand how it is that we can be so wrong and so often. I wrote an op-ed one time. How can so many be in the wrong side of how many can be in the wrong side of right? It's a question we'll continue to ask. And I guarantee you, when that grandson that I spoke about, who just was bar mitzvahed, when his son is bar mitzvahed, I'll be an old man. You can invite me to be on the show again. And I'm going to talk about the fact that the world hasn't accepted Israel's right to exist. It's not going to change.
What steps would you suggest, if you could suggest, to this government, this new government, or some people in this government, to make changes?
Well, it's a great question. And there's a very simple answer, actually. First of all, the parties that make up this government, we're talking about United Torah Judaism, we talk about Shas, we talk about religious Zionism, we talk about Likud. And even within religious Zionism, you could sort of break it down into the two factions, but nonetheless, we're talking about 4 parties. Each of these parties, they're traditional, they're religious, they're nationalistic. I mean, some are more Zionist than others, obviously. I mean, if you look at United Torah Judaism as opposed to religious Zionism. But they all have one vested interest, that this government lasts the 4 years that it was elected to last. Unlike the previous coalition, which was made up of, it was the most schizophrenic, which you had people who campaigned as right-wing nationalists, Naftali Bennett and Gideon Sa'ar, Victor Lieberman, and joined the left. And then you had an Arab party that was Ram, which was in it. It was a government that was bound, it was a coalition which was bound to fail. And it did. This government has every reason not to fail for 4 years. For 4 years. And for those 4 years, and it'll be maybe Netanyahu's probably his swan song, it'll be their opportunity to actually say, we're going to do what we need to do, damn everybody else. The Democratic Party has given up on Israel. The Democratic Party is anti-Israel in America. It's anti-Israel. And so what Israel should do is say, we're going to do what's best for us. If you're with us, thank you. We appreciate it. And if you're not, Jabbo, go to hell. We don't care. Israel needs to do, and I want to tell you, the world will respect them. Because we've said this, you've said this many times before, Mayor. If you don't have self-respect, you'll never get others' respect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I'm hoping will happen with, I'm sure this is probably going to be Bibi's last time as being prime minister. So, I mean, he's written about it extensively. He boasts about it, that he puts Israel as the Jewish state first and foremost. Take a stand, take a real stand. This is your moment in history.
We were all happy that Bibi was elected enough that he could put together the coalition government that we now support. But if anyone actually believes that Bibi Netanyahu is a right winger, they need to move up on the back of the classroom and pay better attention. Bibi Netanyahu is a right of center moderate. Bibi Netanyahu is the Prime Minister who on too many occasions has given Hamas a ceasefire rather than destroying Hamas. And as you said, and Hamas today sits on the Temple Mount. It's remarkable. If you would ask the average person who thinks that they know something about geopolitics, they would tell you, sure, Hamas, they're in Gaza. And to come back to Anthony Blinken, the two-state solution, the two-state illusion, presupposes two states. Never mind that Jordan is Palestine. Put that aside for the moment. The two states that they presuppose is the following. The Jewish state called Israel and an Arab state called Palestine. And so the question is logically asked, where is Palestine? What is Palestine?
Yep.
Who is Palestine? And the answer that will be given to you by Tony Blinken is Palestine will be some kind of confederation, a merger of Gaza and, to use their term, the West Bank. Does Hamas know that part of the two-state solution is accepting Israel's right to exist? Because that's what Blinken thinks. They refuse to respond to the realities of the ground, and we play along. And the mistake that we made, and Bibi makes the same mistake, is we petition the other side to come to the peace table, thinking that when they choose not to, it'll show that we're the good guys. Well, Bibi, go look at the UN votes and find out who the world thinks the good guys are. We live in an anti-Semitic world. We began by talking about anti-Semitism, in unprecedented numbers throughout the Western world, whatever. There's a reason for it, and that is because they're allowed to get away with it.
Right.
And the biggest mistake, I realize the clock is ticking, we're almost done. I've spoken about this as someone who's a historian when it comes to Israel. People talk about the great tragedies that the modern state of Israel has had to suffer. And they talk about the casualties of all the various wars. 1% of Israel's population, 1% of the Jewish population of Israel died in the War of Independence. 1%. It's a remarkable number, actually. And yet, for me, the greatest tragedy in Israel, modern Israel's history, wasn't the Yom Kippur War or the War of Independence. It was September 13, 1993, when the Israeli Prime Minister offered his feeble hand and shook the hand of Yasser Arafat and declared him a peace partner. And what we did is we took the biggest mass murder of Jewish children since Hitler and declared him a peace partner. And we have been in the place of Oslo ever since. We made a mistake and we suffered every single day.
Oh, listen, absolutely. You know what? We had as a guest a number of months ago an IDF veteran, well-spoken of reality in Israel, Amir Avivi. You probably read some of his stuff. And Amir Avivi, his organization, conducted a study, a survey in Israel, in-depth study. They found, I think the figure was 75% of Israeli Arab citizens of Israel don't recognize Israel, don't recognize the Jewish people's right to the state of Israel, to a Jewish state.
That's right.
25% of the Arab population in Israel, Arab citizens of Israel, would join a war actively against Israel if there was another Arab war that would break out. Now, one of the stats that should be there, I would like to see there. I'm very curious about this. Of that 25%, what is the age group that would want to join? Because I believe probably the younger So the older wouldn't join. So then really what is that 25 representing then? That 25%? That's a huge number.
There's something about polls, first of all. Believe me, those numbers are even worse than what you just mentioned, because people realize that they're being questioned. What a person thinks and what a person says behind closed doors is a lot more radical than what he's willing to tell
Sure.
the pollsters. A generation and a half ago, 1982, Rabbi Meir Kahane wrote a book, They Must Go. And in the book, They Must Go, he referred to, not for the first time, he referred to the Arabs of Israel, as a fifth column, and certainly a potential fifth column. And he was of course vilified. He was vilified and everything else. They're good citizens, and everything. Well, in March of 2021, what we saw pogroms in Israel.
Yep.
In Arab towns in Israel.
Yep.
And the violence was perpetrated by Arab citizens of Israel. And even though Israel responded quite feebly, Israel refuses to acknowledge that they are indeed a potential, if not even more, fifth column. Israel refuses because it seems the Jews are somehow afraid to recognize bad news. We began by talking about Jabotinsky. Jabotinsky was referred to by the Jewish socialists, by the Ben-GVIR people, as a prophet of doom, because he dared to warn the Jews of Europe that there was an impending Holocaust. He wrote a piece in 1934 titled Chloroformed, in which he talked about the fact that it appears that the Jewish people living in Europe seem to be oblivious to the fact that anti-Semitism, mind you, this is 1934. It's only a year after Hitler came to power. It was a year after Dachau was established, but nonetheless, no one had any indication, unless, as Jabotinsky said, you opened your eyes. And what he said was that the Jewish people seemed to have been chloroformed into a deep sleep, unwilling to recognize that which is right there in front of them. And that seems to be tragically something which is endemic to Jewish history. Again, Jabotinsky was a prophet of doom, and Kahane in his own time was also this prophet of doom, talking about the Arabs of Israel and anti-Semitism and such. And the reality is, we just finished Hanukkah just a short while ago. Hanukkah, we celebrate Hanukkah not because of the victories that we had temporarily with the Maccabees, but because we understood that it was a fight that needed to be fought. Jewish history, once again, I'm quoting a rabbi, said God rewards us not for succeeding, but for fighting the fight. And there are too few people who understand that. There are just too few people.
Well, listen, Mayor, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. We covered a lot of ground tonight about very important issues: Har Bayit, so-called status quo, the issue of a Jewish state, what it means, what it means to be a Jew, in fact. And we'll have you on many more times to so you could help share your knowledge and experience with the Jewish people, with our viewers, and hopefully more Jews will be convinced and understand what needs to be done. But obviously, this so-called status quo and Hamas flags on Har Bayit and all that has to go.
A last word, if I may, Mayor.
Yes.
Nothing great in Jewish history was ever done by the Jewish majority. It was always the Jewish minority, the Maccabees. It was the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. It was always the Jewish minority, and most often against the best interest or wishes, against the best wishes of the Jewish establishment. It's tragic, and we need to recognize that it's also real. Anyhow, I thank you once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Hey, Mayor.
Yes.
So, in 2 minutes or less, I would like to just quickly run through all those Instagram, Twitter memes, only because I think it's a good way to start the year to get people understanding that that on social media, which is what all the kids are reading, ignorant people read it and don't know it's not true. So the reason to fight on social media is not to convince the haters, it's to convince those still on the fence that what they're saying is not true. Particularly teenagers get on Twitter and they see something stated as fact about some Zionist killed 36 kids last month. You know, we know it's not true. So with your permission, I'm going to show, it's less than 2 minutes, okay?
Okay, let's do it.
Mayor Jay, I'd like you to put in your final word before we play Hatikva. So without any further ado, here comes a little video that I think is worth viewing. So basically, it's about social media. And what is social media? It's a new form to disseminate anti-Semitism. And we're talking about all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and even YouTube. We're not talking about the dark web. We're talking about the bright web, where those of us Zionists get dinged and get taken off for days, weeks, and months, but yet the few haters, they continue to flourish. So my little video is the 21st century anti-Semitism cesspool. And everybody wants to jump right in, comment, but this is in the past few years. Back in 2016, there was a book put out, a summary of the rise of anti-Semitism on social media. We're not talking about this year, last year, we're talking about 2016. There was another one in 2018, a conference, a brochure put out. There have been, during the pandemic, there have been online anti-Semitism. This was a video that was done live about anti-Semitism, hate speech, and social media. This is by the Anti-Defamation League before it became an anti-Jewish organization. These are the statistics regarding how Twitter outranks all the others together regarding the blatant anti-Semitism that's being preached. So again, we need to fight it, not to fight the haters, but for the younger, impressionable people on Twitter not to come across something and assume it's true, because they're gullible and they're malleable. So 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, this was done during the pandemic. There was anti-Semitism and hate during the pandemic. This is actually a post from California of a group organized against Semitism. And they are compiling a list of where Jews live in Redwood, California, right? Now, if that's not right out of Nazi Germany, I'm not sure what is. The FBI is presently investigating this group. So I'm not going to read these because there are about 40 of them, but I'm just going to quickly put on the screen some flash points of just what, you know, burn your mother on your father. I mean, may Allah burn their hearts. I mean, it just goes on, Allah destroy the ignorant Jews. This is all over social media. And again, it's basic numbers. You know, if there are 15 million Jews and 2 billion Muslims, I mean, it's hard to compete. Not to mention the black anti-Semites, the left-wing anti-Semites. You know, what a clever, well-written soliloquy. Motherfucker, the world will gas you one day, just like they did during World War II. I mean, this is what kids are reading. This is among my favorites. You know, the fact that the Zionist organization orchestrated 9/11 as well as COVID. I mean, if that's not out of the Black Plague rumors. This is great. This is from summer camp of the Palestinian Islamic Sword of Jerusalem summer camp. We asked Hitler why he left some of you alive. He did so in order to show us how wicked you are. We will come to you from under the ground and hammer fear into your hearts. And above the ground, we will tear your bodies apart with our rockets. Scram into shelters, you mice, you sons of Jewish women. This is what the children are composing at summer camp. And to end it, just with social media, the social media anti-Semitic decade, Lex Maruf. who you may recall was paid $133,000 by Canada in order for him to come up with an anti-racism strategy. These are just a very small sampling of his many posts. Trust me, you don't have to read them. They all say the same thing. So my last comment before we get final words from Mayor, and then Mayor may not. Okay, go ahead. Final words.
The final word. I'm actually going to give the final word to Charles Krauthammer. Charles Krauthammer, who was a good man, a good Jew, an intelligent man. He wrote in the Weekly Standard on May 11th of 1998 the following, and it applies today. This is what he wrote piecemeal in 1998. Israel is the very embodiment of Jewish continuity. It is the only nation on earth that inhabits the same land, bears the same name, speaks the same language, and worships the same God that it did 3,500 years ago. You dig the soil and you find pottery from Davidic times, coins from Bar Kokhba, and 2,000-year-old scrolls written in a script remarkably like the one today, advertising ice cream at an Israeli corner candy store. That's what Charles Krauthammer wrote in 1998. And yet today, and for more than 2 generations now, Israel is called to account to explain if it has a legitimate right to exist, while the Palestinians, a fake people invented in the 1960s as a political tool to counter Zionism, are viewed favorably in a conflict which is mislabeled as Israeli-Palestinian. It is not. It is the Arab or the Muslim war against Israel and the Jews. And we need to wake up.
Absolutely.
Well, Mayor Jolowitz, I was waiting for you to give your favorite line about how we met the enemy and he is us.
Hold on. We have met the enemy and he is us.
That's for you.
There it is. Oh my God. Wait, you need to send that. I need a screenshot of this.
Oh, we'll send it to you.
I'll send you the original.
I need a screenshot. This is unbelievable. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I thought you'd enjoy it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor W., you got some final words before Hatikva?
Final word. Listen, we get the information out as best as we can. We have a website. Go on our website, volunteer, be part of us, israelnow.ca. Make a contribution, a donation to us as well. That would certainly help. And we need to increase. Go on our YouTube channel, also subscribe. We need more subscribers on that. Need to be more effective, stronger. Never back down. Never back down. This is a historic time. We have the state of Israel. We have so much potential with us. Like I said before, over 7 million Jews in Israel right now, and growing. We have challenges in our way. We can't cower. Never, ever cower. Never be intimidated by anti-Semites. Never, ever. Our motto is always never again. Never again. And that means never hide. Never be ashamed of being a Jew. Stand up for being a Jew. Stand up for the goal of a Jewish state and fight the enemies. Thank you very much.
נפש יהודי